Third meeting of the Subcommittee of International Human Rights. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format in pursuant to the order of June 23rd, 2002. Members are in person and taking place by participating by Zoom. Just for the benefit of witnesses and members, some housekeeping items. Please wait until I recognize you before speaking, and when speaking, please speak at a pace that is moderate so that the interpreters can pick up what you're saying. For those participating by Zoom, you have a little icon at the bottom of your screen, the globe icon, if you want to have live without interpretation, French, English, it's your choice. Just a reminder that all comments should be addressed to the chair for those participating in person and by Zoom. So pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the subcommittee on Friday, September 23rd, 2002, our committee will resume its study on the rights and freedoms of women globally and on women in Afghanistan, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. Aujourd'hui, nous avons plusieurs témoins avec nous.
Today we have several witnesses with us.
For women in Afghanistan, Lilia Gashim Rashid, Chair, Board of Directors, Barrister and Solicitor, participating by video. Nous avons aussi deux témoins.
We also have two witnesses in person, the Cercle des ex-parlementaires de l'Assemblée nationale du Québec.
Ancienne membre, Comité des
Mallory Malavoie, former member, Comité des femmes ex-parlementaires, as well as David Payne, former member, Comité sur le parlementarisme et la démocratie.
We are also intending on having a third another witness, fourth witness with us from a third group, Safety and Risk Migration Organization. Donc, tout le monde have 5 minutes to testify. Given that we have two witnesses in person, on va commencer avec.
We will begin with the Cercle des ex-parlementaires. Together you have 5 minutes. And
for 30 seconds, and then we'll conclude. Merci beaucoup.
Mesdames les députés,
ladies and gentlemen, members of Parliament, thank you for offering us the privilege of speaking today to share our concerns regarding the lives of women whose rights are being atrociously violated. I am Mary Malavoie, President of the Women's Committee of the Cercle des ex-parlementaires du Québec, or Circle of Former MNAs, and I am accompanied by David Payne, a member of the Committee on Parliament and Democracy. Since the Taliban took over power in Afghanistan, our committee has been concerned about the plight of Afghan women, particularly those who have been MPs and ministers. These women, as well as those linked to the legal system, are in great danger of harm or death. Unfortunately, in recent events, such as the murder of a former MP, our fears have been confirmed. Video documents that have been relayed to us by contacts in the field add unbearable images to this reality. The members of our committee, former MNAs, feel a sense of solidarity with Afghan women who have worked in the same profession as we have and are now facing dramatic consequences. We feel that the deprivation of their rights is a step backwards for all of humanity. Since the summer of 2021, we have carried out various initiatives with the aim of contributing to the resettlement of Afghan refugees. For example, we wrote an opinion piece in Le Devoir titled SOS for Afghan Women, held several virtual meetings with former Canadian parliamentarians, and we have met with people who have knowledge about what's happening on the ground, including my colleague David, who has offered us much detailed information. Through the Montreal Afghans Women's Centre, we received a letter signed by 49 members of the National Afghan Women's Network. Here's a short excerpt from it. This letter speaks of severe pain, suffering, and challenges inflicted on Afghan women over the past 8 months, especially those women who have been fighting for human rights. This letter is a bitter story about the plundering of our lives, and if we are not rescued from this prison, everything will be buried with us. End of quote. We also have a list of female judges, prosecutors, and lawyers who are at risk of retaliation with their contact information. It is the same case for former parliamentarians inside Afghanistan or in exile. However, for security reasons, we cannot share this information publicly. We recognize that Canada has committed to accepting 40,000 refugees, and approximately 28,000 have been accepted to date. But we are particularly concerned about the desperate situation of women. We think that we need to implement several different things. Urgently amend the anti-terrorist financing provisions of the Criminal Code as outlined in the calls to action. You can find this in Appendix 3 from the Afghan-Canadian Women's Symposium mentioned above. We need to overcome this problem. Re-establish consular services on the ground in Afghanistan and in neighboring countries that host refugees, because we cannot act if we are not on the ground. Currently, the only point of contact for people seeking to come to Canada is through a form. We need direct interaction with individuals. Simplify the procedures Canada has established because they lack organization and efficiency. Settlement procedures are very complex and not adapted to an emergency situation. While some countries are building bridges with groups that come to the aid of those most in danger, such as France, Pakistan, and Qatar, it's not the case for Canada. We need to re-establish rules allowing women inside Afghanistan to submit an application. It's not clear why this change took place, but the result is great injustice, denying hope to those most in need of security. Share detailed information concerning current applications in order to follow their progress. Even our contacts from the Afghan government in exile are unable to find out how many applications have been received, approved, or denied, or how many are pending. Without this information, we cannot act efficiently. Set up an advisory committee with members who have a strong knowledge of the field and active information networks in order to inform the government on how to move forward. In conclusion, we offer our collaboration to any authority that would like to benefit from our knowledge. For our part, we will continue to support a cause, and we will continue to fight for a fair and equitable world. Thank you.
Et on veut continuer avec
And we will continue with Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan.
Leila Gasham Rashid, please, for 5 minutes, and I'll give you the signals. This when 1 and 30 seconds.
Thank you, dear parliamentarians and members of the subcommittee. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson and honorable members of Parliament, for inviting me to appear before the subcommittee. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to start by saying that as a Canadian woman of Iranian descent, born and raised in Saudi Arabia, where my family continues to currently reside, and currently speaking to you from within the region, there is simply no women's rights emergency in the world like that which is occurring in Afghanistan at the moment. It is a fact that no country in the world, Canada included, has achieved complete equality, and there is much work to be done globally in the fight for women's equal rights. Different countries and cultures are on their own paths along this continuum towards the common goal that benefits not only women and girls, but whole societies. The loss of rights and freedoms for women and girls in Afghanistan, however, is a dire crisis, unlike anywhere else in the world. Afghanistan is suffering a dire humanitarian emergency alongside an incomparable human rights disaster. Even when girls are finding ways to continue their learning, they are doing so hungry. This is the only country in the world to officially bar women from learning and from the workplace, a path that has plunged Afghans into ever-deepening poverty, famine, political instability, and gender-based violence. It's no coincidence that the hunger crisis in Afghanistan, with a staggering 95% of households not getting enough to eat, is one of the most acute in the world, at the same time that there has been a brutal crackdown on human rights and basic freedoms. The humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan is caused by the human rights crisis. Canada's response is needed urgently, and should be suited to the magnitude of the crisis. The actions needed must go beyond statements of condemnation. There's a growing perception that the governments of the G8 are inert and undecided in their response to what should properly be treated as a grave human rights crisis demanding immediate, bold action. We're calling for a foreign policy that puts human rights at its center and prioritizes reversing the wrongs that commenced when Afghanistan was so brutally handed over to the Taliban in August 2021, under the nose of the international community. Canada can fund and support the expansion of alternative independent education systems, such as the virtual schools that have emerged since the Taliban's ban on girls' education, as well as the technological infrastructure to support it. There's also an emerging network of independent schools working in exile. Canada can support efforts to scale and enhance exiled and virtual educations for Afghans, ensuring Afghans have access to education credentials that will be recognized internationally. Canada can also support Canadian institutions of higher education to accept transfer students in Afghanistan to participate virtually and help students access programs and courses that make them more eligible for international study opportunities. A wide variety of scholarship programs can be supported, including helping Afghan women pay for education and living expenses at universities outside of Afghanistan in their own region. We're already seeing announcements of significant responses from other countries, but not yet from Canada. Canada can also support Afghan women and girls to access study opportunities in Canada by ensuring Afghan nationals can obtain student visas. Currently, most student visa applications from Afghan nationals are rejected on the grounds of suspicion of dual purpose. While equitable access to quality education is imperative, so is access to work. In December, the Taliban announced a ban on women working in NGO organizations, a devastating blow to both women's ability to earn in an already perilous economic crisis, as well as to the ability of NGOs to provide life-saving aid to a population at risk of famine. The Taliban's policies and behavior have driven out investment and trade and thus job creation, making the country a pariah of the global economy. The Taliban should indeed be isolated, but the very opposite should be done for the people of Afghanistan. Give them access to the global economy. This can be done in many ways. Governments can support Canadian employers to hire residents of Afghanistan for remote work opportunities with incentives like job vouchers or stipends. The dignity and security of the job will feed families more reliably than erratic access to aid. And access to a real education will prove to be a post-Taliban Afghanistan's greatest asset down the road. Finally, we call for Canada to ensure that private sponsorship, scaled refugee programs, and other pathways are available to as many Afghans as possible to come to Canada. In closing, I want to mention that we hear reports of girls being turned away from some schools at gunpoint. This cannot happen on our watch. We must show with our actions, at least as much as our words, that Canada does not accept denying the right to education and work to half a country's population, that we will not stand for gender apartheid, and that when we say we have a feminist foreign policy, we truly mean it, and that we will back that policy with courage, creativity, risk, and resoluteness. I look forward to answering any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gasham. We're now going to continue on to our final witness for 5 minutes from Safety and Risk Migration Organization, Horia Mossadegh. Please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the Government of Canada, the Parliament of Canada, and also for the people of Canada for standing with Afghan people in this very difficult time and allocating humanitarian visa and life-saving support for Afghans at risk. But at the same time, I would like to also say that at the time that we are talking, thousands of Afghans, mostly human rights defenders, civil society activists, journalists were able to resettle in Canada and find a second home at a time when their home and lives were taken away by a terrorist group. Since August 2021, when Afghanistan was handed over to the Taliban, hundreds of Afghan human rights defenders, members of civil society, human rights activists, civil rights activists, journalists, lawyers, entrepreneurs, sports personalities, musicians, and public figures were abducted, arrested, detained, tortured, threatened, with scores were killed, injured, or disappeared in violent attacks by the Taliban and their associates. Peaceful protesters who only demand their fundamental rights to employment and education are abducted, tortured, raped, killed, and disappeared, while some were unlawfully detained for months without any due process. Freedom of expression, association, and peaceful assembly is now to no existence, while hundreds of media outlets, mostly women media outlets, were shut across Afghanistan and few which are still active are facing significant level of restrictions by the Taliban. And Taliban control media news debates, and people who are critical of Taliban are being abducted, arrested, detained, tortured, and some disappear to this day. In the areas where armed resistance is happening against the Taliban, such as Panjshir province and Andarab district, civilians are harassed, arrested, tortured, and executed in the broad daylight. While the summary execution of prisoners of war is a norm within the Taliban, other atrocities such as land grabbing, enforced eviction, enforced displacement of other ethnic groups such as Hazaras in Daikundi, Tajiks and Uzbeks in Takhar, Baghlan and Kunduz provinces happening in the large scale. Of course, the negative impact of these violence are significant, particularly on women and girls. While Taliban's atrocity have no limit and their war against women and girls of Afghanistan goes back to 1990s when they first ruled the country, despite Taliban's fake promises they made during Doha peace agreement in February 2022, Taliban continued to ban Afghan women and girls from employment, education, and systematically violating their basic and fundamental rights. Millions of girls are now out of school, and hundreds of thousands of women, civil servants who lost their jobs, were forced to stay at home. Universities are shut for women and students, and even women are now banned from working from NGOs and in the humanitarian agencies. Since Taliban took control, poverty among women have significantly increased, and now we see that more women beggars are on the streets. More children are doing labor, significant increase in forced marriages, child marriages, and even child trafficking. Meanwhile, from whatever humanitarian aid is provided to the Afghan people, Taliban are taking a significant share of that aid, which goes to the Taliban soldiers, and some of them are involved in committing war crimes in Afghanistan now. The humanitarian aid is most particularly given to the soldiers who fight in the front line or in the places where it deemed to be challenging by the Taliban. And this has been reported by several UN agencies and also other aid agencies. In the past 18 months, while Taliban soldiers, officials operate with blanket immunity from any crime they commit on daily basis in Afghanistan, and the country is run in the absence of any legal framework, and as all laws have been abolished, Taliban leaders, including internationally sanctioned terrorists, are traveling by private jets to the European capitals and around the world, and they are receiving billions of dollars under the name of so-called humanitarian aid, which is used for feeding Taliban soldiers who commit gross human rights violations. At the same time, like before taking too much time, I would like to end my speech by giving some recommendations. While we are extremely thankful to the government and Parliament of Canada for their generous support of Afghans at risk, access to the process of resettlement in Canada is extremely slow and time-consuming. I therefore request to please accelerate the resettlement process of Afghans at risk by allocating more personnel and resources to provide a speedy and timely response to the growing needs of Afghans at risk. Please provide certain organizations such as Frontline Defenders, Freedom House, Journalist Safety Committee, International Bar Associations, and others with a quota of visas for the human rights defenders, women rights activists, women and men media workers and journalists, lawyers, so they can provide the support and protection they need who are genuinely at high risk. While at the same time, hundreds of other women protesters are living in fear of deportation in Pakistan and Iran, and without having any prospects for the future and resettlement to any other country.
Thank you, Ms. Musaddiq, and we'll continue with those recommendations in the question and answers. In order to have two proper rounds, we'll have our first round for 6 minutes and then the remainder time afterwards. We're going to start with Mr. Versen, then moving to Ms. Vanderbilt afterwards. Mr. Versen, for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I'd like to start with Leila, just around how is the Taliban funded, and what's their what is their reasoning for like ending ability for women to go to school and things like that?
Well, I mean, I can take some guesses about how the Taliban is funded, but of course, this is a very complicated question. Both the regional aspect of countries in the region who have some benefit to dealing with the Taliban, as well as the ban on education. Of course, this goes back to the Taliban ideology. Their purpose is to bar women from rights. This includes rights to education as well as rights to work. As to why they have this ideology, I mean, that's everyone's question on everyone's mind. I wish I could tell you and we could fix it, but we've been trying to do that for many years.
What was the role of Canadian Armed Forces in the region? We were in Afghanistan for over a decade. How has that played into our relationship with Afghanistan in general?
Well, of course, speaking on behalf of Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan, and our focus is mainly on education. The time that the Canadian Armed Forces were in Afghanistan was very helpful in providing aid, providing support to aid agencies to continue their work there. We've made tremendous gains in Afghanistan in the sectors of education for girls and women, as well as for women in the workplace. In fact, I would say that the tremendous losses that have occurred since the Taliban's takeover in that time are quite tragic. The regional aspect of Taliban's funding, despite their very restrictive ideology, is a very good question. I think that we have government actors like China and Russia who will continue to do work with the Taliban, and this is problematic for others in the region, of course, and of course for the rest of the world, especially for women who are being denied an education. The Taliban continue to do trade with Pakistan. And this was ongoing even during the time of before the Taliban's takeover in 2021. And we know that the funding that the Taliban receives globally is from those who share their ideology. During the time that the Canadian Armed Forces were there, again, it was a lot of we've managed to do a lot of work during that time. Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan has been in that country since 1998, pardon me. So we operated the entire time that the Canadian forces were there, and we found that, of course, we had access to a significant ability to do our work, as well as other aid organizations, of course.
Afghanistan's a relatively large country. Do you find that there's areas in Afghanistan that you're able to operate in and other areas that you're not, or is it fairly much your organization has been pushed outside of the entire boundaries of Afghanistan?
I'm assuming you mean at the moment. Well, we continue operations that provide services to Afghan women and girls. Most of our operations at the moment are based in Canada. So, for example, we have made tremendous gains in expanding our virtual programming for virtual schools. One of the most effective programs has been our DD classrooms, which allows girls to continue their education virtually with also support in providing internet packages and equipment and power banks and so on. We also have expanded our scholarships program, which allows girls to continue their education and women to continue their education abroad. I prefer not to comment on our work in the country. Obviously, the students who access our programs in the country are at risk of, or quite at risk for security reasons. We prefer not to. Although we operate throughout the country, of course, our programs are provided throughout the country.
Okay, and just around, you mentioned something around you've set up schools outside of the country around the world for Afghan nationals. Is there regulatory or recognition that the action that the Canadian government can take to help with that?
Within a minute.
Absolutely. I could spend 10 minutes talking about this, of course. So we reach Afghans all over Afghanistan and also displaced Afghans. One of our latest programs is remote communication assistance, for example. We're also opening our first digital learning center for Afghan refugees in Pakistan. One of our biggest programs at the moment is working on getting access to virtual education and support from international higher education institutions for women who've been banned from universities. But we deliver virtual education in Afghanistan. We provide scholarships, as I said, remote access by providing, infrastructure support and digital learning center in Pakistan. We also have advocacy campaigns as well. But there's much the Canadian government can do. First of all, the Canadian government can, for example, provide grants and scholarships to institutions taking steps to support women in Afghanistan to access education outside of the country. We know that statements of condemnation are not influential at all in the Taliban. They don't care at all about international finger wagging. So ways to circumvent the Taliban to access for girls and women to access education is key. Of course, supporting Afghans to leave the country by providing streamlined visa access or refugee sponsorship or any programs really that support that is very important. And then, of course, access to safe refuge to any third country is also very important. Really funding and scaling any type of alternative independent education system is really crucial right now because ultimately, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cashman. You should continue those thoughts as we continue to go into the questions. Ms. Vanderbilt for 6 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. And first, I'd just like to thank all of you for the vitally important work that you're doing. I think all of us as parliamentarians look at what's happening in Afghanistan with great alarm, and the word crisis is not even strong enough. And thank you so much. And I'd like to start with Ms. Gasham because you have come to us with some very, very concrete, tangible things like the virtual learning that we can do, and I think that's very helpful for our recommendations. I'd like to go to the resettling in Canada, because I know that Canada, of course, opened up 40,000 through the special program, 40,000 spaces. I think we've settled over 27,000 already. I hear you on the speed of that. The one thing I wanted to ask, because we had over 1 million emails, 1 million applicants for those 40,000 spaces, and when we opened up in October 3,000 spaces for people who were outside of Afghanistan but couldn't get refugee status, the quota was reached in the first day that it was opened up. So the magnitude of this problem is overwhelming. And I look at things like, when we saw MP Mursal Nabizada, who was killed, who was assassinated, and the plight of other human rights defenders and members of parliament, we had created, as a result of this committee, a human rights defenders stream of immigration. Now, it was created at only 250 per year. We did it through partners, so UNHCR and Frontline Defenders and Protect Defenders to identify. I'm wondering if scaling up something like that, targeting specifically at human rights defenders who are known, and we know, organizations on the ground know who they are. If that could be scaled up and working through partners, as some of you suggested, if that might be an easier and better way to try to target the people who are the most in danger. I'm going to put it first to Ms. Gasham, and then if I could ask everybody else to answer. And keeping in consideration we only have a few minutes. Go ahead, Ms. Gasham.
Thank you very much. Absolutely. The answer is yes, yes, yes. Should we scale this program up? We should definitely scale it as much as we possibly can. There are a few different points to consider here. The first is that we should be accepting education and gender. So if you are simply a woman in Afghanistan, that should be recognized as a grounds for seeking asylum or for becoming eligible for these pathways in Canada. Because at the moment, these two issues are so inherently interlinked that if you are a woman in Afghanistan, if you are in Afghanistan at the moment, you're at risk, but especially for women and girls at the moment, the risk is so severe and these concepts are so interlinked that that automatically would provide some sort of link for them to become eligible for these pathways. We should be scaling all programs, in fact, whether they're private sponsorship programs, skilled refugee pathways. So absolutely, there's a lot of room for work here. We obviously cannot bring everybody in Afghanistan to Canada, which would be my preferred way to do this if possible. But we know that this is not possible, but we know other countries are already ahead of Canada in this. For example, Denmark announced on Monday that they would grant asylum status to Afghan women solely based on gender. So this is the numbers are small. They haven't scaled. They won't have the ability to scale to as large of a program as Canada can. But we definitely are encouraged to see signs like this in the international community. Would like to see much more of this. All programs that allow for this are absolutely very important and should be streamlined as much as possible.
Thank you, Ms. Mossadegh. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, definitely. I would like to say it's really, really important that if there are specific programs and quotas, particularly for the human rights defenders, journalists, and lawyers who are at extreme risk in Afghanistan, my organization, Safety and Risk Mitigation Organization, we receive on daily basis tens of cases of women human rights defenders, men human rights defenders who are at grave risk, and they are being threatened, they are being detained, they are being tortured, and even the family members of many human rights defenders, they are facing significant amount of threats by the Taliban simply because of the human rights work that their family members are doing. And at the same time, I would like to emphasize on protection of journalists as well as women protesters, because many of these women protesters are putting their lives on the line, and then they themselves and also their immediate family members are facing a lot of consequences for what they are standing and for what they are doing.
Would you like to answer as well, Ms. Malavoy or Mr. Payne?
Yeah, I think I'd like to just add to what's been said. The situation is extremely urgent. There are countries that have worked quicker and done better than Canada. I think that Canada has commendable goals. We want to be a human rights country and a feminist country. And the problem is that Canada isn't moving quickly enough. In the case of Afghan women, we've seen that Denmark recently has made its regulations softer to help Afghan women more quickly, and so I'm wondering why Canada isn't acting more quickly.
Right now, per capita, Canada has resettled the most, but I hear you. I think all of us are devastated when we see what is happening in that place. So I don't think I have much time. Do I have another question? No? Okay. Thank you again. I appreciate the work that you're all doing. It's so important. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vanderbilt. Et maintenant, on va tourner.
And now we will go to Mr. Brunel Duceppe for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Firstly, thank you to all our witnesses for your very important presence for this very important study. I don't want to waste time. I have questions for Ms. Malavoy and Mr. Payne. You can decide who answers each question. I have the impression that you have some detailed information in terms of living conditions in Afghanistan. We can see how urgent the situation is. Ms. Malavoy, could you describe the current reality of Afghan women in Afghanistan? Yes. My name is David Payne, a former member. I was a member, an MNA, for 15 years in Quebec. Over the last 20 years, I spent 3 years in Afghanistan leading a parliamentary group. For the last year and a half, about 2 to 3 times a week, I have discussions with women, amongst others. And what I can say is that the current situation they are facing is catastrophic. I could even show you videos of the type of torture that they are experiencing. Right here, I have a list of 65 female judges. Several of them have passed away. Greece created a specific category for women who are attorneys in Greece. They created this special category for visas. My answer, Mr. Duceppe, would say, think about what Sean Fraser said a couple weeks ago, that there really is no categorization for those who benefit from these programs. I would have to disagree with him. We know very clearly that interpreters had their own special category created for them. There's also those who worked with the embassy that are a special category. And you might say, well, that would be favoritism. Well, out of the 65 judges that I have here, as far as I'm aware, Canada hasn't accepted even one of them, because there's no specific category. Now, we have questions because we know that there was selection for interpreters, for those working for the embassy. Out of these 65 individuals that I have here, and I have all their information, couldn't we think of them? Thank you very much. Now we only have 3 minutes left. Now, Ms. Malavoie, in your speech, you spoke more about what the government is doing on the ground. So I'm going to get back to what we said in our speech, and then I'll let David speak. What we're saying is that right now, all Afghan women have is a form. And if there's an issue, we send them to the UN. So there's no direct communication with individuals. And I know David has more information on that. What are the selection criteria that the government has? How do we go about this? Are they their own category? How do they select applicants? In terms of humanitarian applicants, well, we don't know. We would like to intervene, but we can't. So it's not just criteria. What are the criteria? But how does the minister make its decisions? Well, they're actually not communicating with those applicants. We want to help. I have 250 MPs that I worked with for 3 years. I know many of them. We have some names here. Here we have one individual that was Secretary of Defense. Marcel Navizada was on another list asking for help, but she was killed. But there's no category for MPs. There's no category for lawyers. There's no category for anyone in the legal system. We need to condemn the Taliban. Those who speak up against them, though, often are killed. And there are so many of these horrific stories. So what I'm understanding is that applicants don't have any information on the application process, how many applications have been submitted, where they are in the process. So that is a problem. There's about 30,000 people who would like to come here. But then what are the categories for these applications? We don't know. Thank you. So very quickly, I'd like a yes or no from each witness. Is the Canadian Criminal Code harmful to our work on the ground in Afghanistan? Absolutely.
Sadiq.
Ms. Mossadegh?
I think
Madame Gashim.
Absolutely, we need to see the change as soon as possible.
Merci. Mon chronomètre me dit.
Thank you. I don't think I have any more time, but Mr. Chair, is that the case? We're at 6 minutes now. Okay. Next time, if I could just have visual contact with you, just so I know. This is the first time I'm here online, and usually I'm used to having a visual signal. I think it would make things a little bit easier. Thank you, and thank you to our witnesses.
Duceppe.
Thank you.
Pour 6 minutes.
Now 6 minutes. Ms. McPherson.
I want to thank all of the witnesses for being here today and sharing this important information with us. This has been something that has been incredibly difficult to watch happen in Afghanistan. We know we are at 501 days since education has been taken away from women, from girls in Afghanistan. We know the results of what happened last time when the Taliban took education away for 6 years from women and girls in Afghanistan. And I want to tell you all that I will do everything I can to do, as a member of parliament, to do what I can to help the women of Afghanistan, because that it can't be allowed to happen again. I also want to say that on January 15th, when I woke up and found out that the member of parliament, that Alexis Brunel-Duceppe and myself, with others from other parties, have been trying to bring to Canada, had been murdered, it was probably one of the worst days of my career as a parliamentarian. But what I want to talk about right now a little bit is the education piece, I guess. You know, it's very clear that Canada must change its anti-terrorism laws. We have had the anti-terrorism law. The government has said they will change them. It has been months and months and months. Nothing has happened. I'll continue to push them on that. But in terms of education, in terms of ways that we can support women and girls, I am going to ask my colleagues from within Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan to just talk a little bit about the implications on women, and particularly the implications around not just women's and girls not having access, but what the Taliban is doing in Afghanistan with regards to the curriculum and the other pieces of the education system that are being irrevocably damaged at the moment in Afghanistan.
Thank you for the question. This is a very, very important question, actually, that is very touched upon very little in discussions around Afghanistan and the education piece there. So we have serious concerns about the curriculum changes that the Taliban is proposing. Their overhauled curriculum was leaked some months ago, and this actually might be the most consequential outcome of the Taliban's takeover in our view. Of course, it'll affect boys immediately who will be subject to the curriculum right away. But assuming that the Taliban eventually succumb to the pressure to reopen girls' schools, so this is the education that the girls will be coming back to as well. So, so the effort to provide alternative forms of quality education, virtual or otherwise, to Afghan children shouldn't be seen as a short-term plan. We really recommend that this is a long-term need that we'll be seeing. And just for those on this panel who aren't aware of what the new curriculum looks like or will look like in Afghanistan, it's a complete overhaul. Entire subjects are being removed. Textbooks will be stripped of all images of living things, girls doing sports, mention of democracy or human rights, or non-Islamic beliefs, as they call it, like love for all humanity, or any sort of encouragement of peace or women's rights or education. The UN is referred to as an evil organization. There's no mention of music or television or parties or birthdays. The radio is referred to as a colonial media. No mention of elections, as I said. A lot of stripping of Afghan traditions as well, and historical and literary figures. What will be included in the curriculum is, and this is a quote from the document, they state that the purpose of the curriculum is to maintain and expand the ideological interests of the Taliban. So, so again, in their own words, they recommend that the curriculum is used to spread the seeds of hatred against Western countries, should be planted in students' minds. This is a direct quote from their document. So really, it's propagating their narrative of history, focusing on the Islamic world. They even, in the curriculum, suggest that prioritizing propagating jihad, articulating justifications for the use of violence against, to advance the Taliban's goals, the rules of killing in war and justification for killing other Muslims even. So it's terrible. The curriculum we're looking at is no better than no education at all. Of course, we thought that this was predictable. We saw something like this in the previous rule. It's going to have severe consequences. The security risk and the consequences that we will see from this curriculum change globally is quite obvious. The humanitarian consequences as well, and development and aid consequences. Getting an education from Afghanistan will be a stain on its graduates rather than an actual credential. There's a lot that Canada can do to sort of respond to the situation. So I'll just briefly summarize. We know, again, statements of condemnation, Taliban doesn't care about from the international community, not effective. So the more effective approach here would be to completely circumvent the Taliban in providing an education to Afghan children. virtual education is definitely one of the strongest ways that Canada can provide support to what we hope is students who will go back to post-Taliban Afghanistan and be their real asset there. Of course, support for students or Afghans leaving to access education is really important. Access to safe refuge and harbor, funding alternative independent education systems, and of course, funding schools for displaced Afghans. So there's really a huge opportunity here. There's such a drive from Afghans to get a good education. So if this is available to them or made available to them, you could end up with a population that's accessing better quality and a more relevant education than they would have otherwise. So it's going to take a lot of will and creativity and willingness to take risks on behalf of Canada.
Thank you, Ms. Gashman. I don't mean to interrupt, but I did want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about the Let Her Learn campaign. You only have about 30 seconds, but if you could share with this committee some information about that, that would be fantastic.
Within 30 seconds.
Yeah. Absolutely. So with the Taliban mandating changes to higher education and banning women from university, our campaign seeks to provide an ability for universities and higher education institutions to sign up to, for example, accept transfer students, enable virtual enrollment, waive application fees, assist with financial needs for Afghan women, prepare future university students, contribute resources and volunteers. I'm speaking as quickly as I can, but really the point here is that the Canadian government can do a lot to provide grants and scholarships to these institutions that are taking these steps and process student visas for Afghan women more efficiently and perhaps in a separate category than how other student visas are currently processed.
Thank you. And now we'll continue with our next round. For 3.5 minutes, Mr. Assasi. I won't prejudice you for that, but.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was my understanding that we'd be going to the Conservative member next. Is that not correct?
In the second and subsequent rounds, it's always the Liberals first. But
okay. Thank you for that. My apologies. So allow me to start off by thanking all the witnesses for the incredibly urgent and vital work that they are doing. Very, very grateful. If I could start with Ms. Gasham. Thank you very much for the ideas you shared with us. I think you're absolutely right that there is a crisis and there should be a focus on education. Now, when it came to funding alternative types of education for Afghan women, you did suggest that other countries have been more forceful and more generous in making those opportunities available. And of course, I speak here of virtual opportunities. Could you tell us what other countries are doing? Because I think it is imperative that Canada do so as well. And I'm sure that all the members of our committee would very much like to advocate for that. So could you share what other countries are doing and the lessons to be learned for Canada?
Absolutely. So there have been some announcements so far that have been really promising. We know that, for example, Germany has announced scholarships to support 5,000 women to study in neighboring countries. This is very significant. And we hope it's only the first step for a country like Germany in their decisions on this topic. We know that, for example, British universities are offering free courses to women in Afghanistan through Future Learn. So this has the capacity to scale up very quickly, it's also a very significant step in the right direction. The University of the People has over, I think, 2,000 Afghan women currently enrolled in their free programs for degrees. And so there's a lot being done. I could go on, but absolutely, I would say that the key takeaway here is that Canada is an outlier in this work. We are behind, and we need to catch up. That would be my recommendation here.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. All the examples with respect to virtual education. Insofar as transfer, because I think you cited two different distinct programs. You mentioned transfer students as well. Can you unpack that for us so we have a better sense as to what can be done on that end of things as well?
Within a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the big things that will help with the ban on higher education for Afghan women at the moment is to allow universities, or to encourage universities to allow for a transfer. So women, for example, in Afghanistan who are partway through their degrees, universities in Canada, what we're calling for is for universities in Canada to recognize their prior education and to streamline the administrative process, for example, to waive international student fees and perhaps consider their fees to be Canadian tuition fees instead. So practical steps like this would definitely help with the transfer of current existing students in Afghanistan to Canadian universities. The role of the government of Canada is very important, though, because in our view, if the change made is in terms of processing student visa applications by Canada for Afghan women and exemptions made for them to process those quickly, this signals to universities that Canada is serious about taking on these students quite urgently.
Thank you. And now we'll continue with the Conservatives. Mr. Abultayev.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the witnesses. And Ms. Gasham, you've presented a lot of practical points. I think it's a nice roadmap to move forward. I believe this is a long-term, we need a long-term alternative toward education. The focus on it is very, very critical. And based on the scale, based on this is an ongoing thing, as long as Taliban is there, we need to have that alternative in place. The question is, what do you see the best practice in order to achieve the result needed? And what did we learn from the 20 years before we gave basically back this country to Taliban as far as education?
I'm not clear on your first question, but I'll answer the second question. Of course, there's a lot to be learned from the last 20 years when we had access to the educator to be able to build an education system in Afghanistan. The first thing that I would say, and this is my personal view, not from any studies, but there's a huge willingness in Afghanistan from Afghan boys and girls to learn. I know that my colleague Horia is a lot more well versed in this, as she's from there and has been there during that time. But there's a big willingness, and of course the number of women that we just talked about recently, the judges, the lawyers, the rights activists, the women in parliament. This didn't happen overnight, but 20 years is a very short amount of time to go from no education whatsoever for women and girls to having that volume of girls participating not only on the fringe of society, but in a very meaningful way in society in Afghanistan.
But the 20 years were significant. The question that backs itself is that we've done 20 years of educating the vast population of Afghanistan, mostly women and girls. How did that can be deposited for the future plan to be able to continue to do what we need to do in order to be able to achieve the result that we are looking for?
Absolutely. So I think the efforts are not lost. The education doesn't go anywhere. People are still educated, and they are able to continue contributing to their economy and to their culture and their people, whether that's within the country or remotely. We see a lot of resistance from women and men in Afghanistan constantly to the current regime and to the consequences of it. But of course, hiring women and men remotely, especially women who aren't able to work in Afghanistan, virtually, we know we have a shortage of labor in Canada, for example. So providing access to virtual work. There's a massive talent pool of people who are engineers and software engineers and lawyers and doctors and all sorts of very useful education credentials that we could definitely use remotely. But of course, also to allow those people who've gained such a credible education over the years to continue providing, for example, education to their own women and girls, and especially the children in these virtual schools. So for example, one of our programs, DD Classrooms, allows us to hire Afghan women in Afghanistan to continue teaching, teachers who were previously teaching in Afghanistan to continue teaching in the country virtually to girls who are in Afghanistan, all on a virtual platform. So, absolutely this education is not lost and it hasn't gone anywhere.
Thank you, Mr. Abultayev. We'll continue on to Monsieur Alexis Brunel-Duceppe for 3 minutes.
For 3 minutes, Mr. Alexis Duceppe. 3 minutes, 30 seconds. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Malavoie, you mentioned that Canada is not doing enough compared to other countries. Could you say more on that, please? I would like to add something to the previous question that we didn't get an answer to yet. There's an example of what we call the American University of Kabul. It was closed after the Taliban took power. Since then, they started doing online classes outside of the country, and this is still the case today. Now, let's imagine Qatar that has settled many women as we speak. Now, I won't give you any names, but I know women who are going to the University of Qatar. And all those who have graduated from university outside of Qatar will be able to get a visa after graduation from other countries like the US, for example. My question is, why isn't Canada able to do something like this? Why can't we do better, such as online courses for lawyers? We could work in a way that's similar to what we've done with what we call safe houses. So we can suggest the most vulnerable categories of people, and we have lists of these peoples. But the minister is not using any of these selection criteria. And then we have to look at how we're using the criteria. But I don't think we're really using enough of this communication that we should have with people in Afghanistan. We can help people better by being in closer contact with them. So I have 1 minute left. You could either add something that hasn't come up yet, or you could talk to me about what you think the top priority is for you. What we would also like to remind everyone is that the Minister of Immigration has discretionary power. When we wanted to repatriate people from Syria, we were able to do it. And there's other examples of this too. Given the situation in Afghanistan, the minister still doesn't want to use this power. But the minister would be able to make decisions that he's not right now. Unfortunately, we don't have any more time to continue.
So if you have the floor again, then you can continue with that.
Merci tout le monde.
Thank you, everyone.
Ms. McPherson for 3.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to start with, I know we didn't get quite enough time to talk as much as I would have liked to about the Let Her Learn campaign. So I'm wondering, Ms. Grasham, if you could please send us a written submission on that, just some more information for the analysts and for the committee. But I want to go back to the the anti-terrorism laws and the need for the humanitarian carve-out. And I'd actually like to ask Ms. Malloy, what would it mean for Afghans? What would it mean for Canadian CSOs or NGOs if the government actually followed through with what they have promised and fixed the humanitarian carve-out within our anti-terrorism legislation? What would that mean for Afghans?
Well, I can say, first of all, that Canada has a remarkable history of support in all kinds of training programs in Afghanistan. And I've lived with them for 3 years, and I've seen them, the extraordinary work of Canadians and humanitarian groups of all kinds, medical, legislative, parliamentary. There are still people in Canada qui peuvent supporter, qui peuvent appuyer.
That can truly support the Minister of Immigration. There's a knowledge network. We can look at what happened in the past in Afghanistan. Ministers can use this resource. and that's significant, be it online medical care, online education. There are people also who can travel, but unfortunately we're tied down by regulations. We can't offer humanitarian aid in this country. There are ethical issues right now in terms of our immigration policy as we speak.
It's clear to all of us in this room that other countries have found their way through that particular thing. So the fact that Canada has not and has dragged its feet on this is quite shocking.
The US, Italy, Greece all have ad hoc programs, like my colleague said. But up until now, in Afghanistan, we have nothing.
Well, and I you know, as I think about this, I want to end this session. It's so important, but I wanted to end it on a hopeful note, because I think that the women of Afghanistan deserve, you know, we need to honor them for the fight that they are also doing on the ground. I know all of us will continue to work to help those who are most at risk in Afghanistan. We will continue to do what we can to push our government. But I did want to share with the committee a story. I was speaking to a grade 6 class in Edmonton, Alberta last constituency week. And I was telling them about how sad I was, because we had just found out about this member of parliament and, of course, the idea that women and girls couldn't go to school. And sitting in the front row of one of those classrooms was an Afghan girl who had come in the last year. And she was in school. And it gave me such hope, and it makes me so resolved to help all of those millions of women and girls who are not given that opportunity right now. So thank you all so much for being here and sharing this with us. And I know all of us in this committee will continue to fight for those women and girls.
Thank you, Ms. McPherson, to help us conclude on that note. And merci à tous les témoins d'être ici.
Thank you to all our witnesses for being here today.
Ms. Malvois, Madame Malvois, for being here in person. And to those who've been participating by Zoom, Ms. Gasham and Ms. Mossadegh, thank you for your testimony today. It'll be reflected in our report. Everything you've said is evidence for us. We will take this and carry it forth. Maintenant, we will move into closed session to discuss committee business. And again, a sincere thank you to the witnesses who came online, and to those who came in person. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
you.